Hey, and welcome back to Full Time, presented by Amazon Business. My name is Tamerra Griffin, and I am so excited to let you know that on this episode, we are going to be joined by the former U.S. Women's National Team player and the editor-in-chief of the women's game, Sam Mewis, friend of the pod. She has made such an interesting transition from her playing career into the media landscape, covering the women's game from all angles. And we're going to ask her all about how she's made that move, the other things she's gotten up to, like coaching, and what she's making of this transition so far. Of course, in order to do that, I'm going to be joined by my friend and former Vermont resident, Meg Linehan. Meg, how's it going?
Former Vermont resident. I'm a current Vermont resident.
Did I say former?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You know, it's
too
fine.
Many formers.
We were in such peak Vermont mode last week. Sam Mewis did a live show here at Higher Ground, which is kind of like our main concert venue, and it was such a funny time because also it was so sweet. Like the men's team all came to watch the show. The women's team was obviously just arriving into town for their couple of games this week, the exhibition games that they've got going. So yeah, I think Sam Mewis and I have just been in like peak women's soccer and Vermont mode now for a few days, and it's really funny to like have this little podcast trade.
I love it. And I have to say, anytime you talk about Vermont, anytime Sam mentions Vermont, I just get this, as someone who's never visited, I get this image of like a modern day Stars Hollow kind of vibe. Everything is just so quaint. Everything is just so idyllic. It almost feels like it's been written into a novel that I would be snatching off of a bookshelf. So to know that it's real sometimes takes a bit of imagination from my part because it just sounds so lovely.
It is really like Sam and I did finally cross paths on the bike path here in downtown. So it's just, and that's the other thing about Burlington too. It's like it is pretty small and it is really easy to like spot people that you know. And that was again a big topic that came up of just like this community has, I think, you know, she's a more recent movie into this space, but the same happened for me of just, you know, you kind of fall into a new place and you don't really necessarily know anyone. When my wife and I moved up here, Vermont Green had like just started, and so it became an avenue for local soccer, obviously, but then this whole other local community, and that's kind of the whole point of like what we do, right? Like, yes, we cover it, but the reason why I think we all fell in love with the sport in the first place was because it offered something and a community, and, you know, all of our friends kind of come through this space as well. So it's been a fun week.
I mean, it's another interpretation of ball is life. You know, there's what you do on the field and then there's a community that you build around it. But the fact that you both live in this one city still to me is like so rare and so beautiful. And it adds so much to this conversation, of course, that we're going to have. But before we get there, before I forget, this is a friendly and urgent reminder that we are still collecting questions for our upcoming mailbag episodes. So if you haven't slid into our DMs on Instagram, on Blue Sky, on TikTok, any of the places that you scroll, make sure that you do that. We are at TA Full Time. If you prefer to email because it's too much to type and you're maybe having an extra tab open when you should be working, first, no one will tell. And also, you can do that at fulltime@theathletic.com. Also, just make sure that you're following us there, period, because we have a lot going on. We have videos that you won't see anywhere else that we're posting to our Instagram these days. Of course, this show will always appear on YouTube. There are so many ways to follow what's going on with us. I just want to make sure that you're staying up to date. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, our conversation with Sam Mewis.
Wow. I am so excited to introduce fellow Vermonter, Sam Mewis, editor-in-chief of the women's game, head coach of Vermont Green FC women. I mean, like at this point, I feel like we could keep going, but those are the two main things that we want to talk about this week. But
my
Sam,
gosh.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Huge fan of your podcast. And coming from somebody who makes podcasts themselves, I feel like that's a great compliment. So I love what you all are doing. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sam. All right, let's maybe start with Vermont, just because I feel like that's
perfect.
You know, we just did that live show together. I think, you know, we were joking backstage. We should count how many times Vermont got said in the span of an hour and a half. But, you know, you're a year and a half out from, you know, moving on from playing. What has it been like moving up here, getting into this space? Like, let's just do a Sam Mewis check-in to start.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for asking, first of all, and thank you for coming on my live show. We did the women's game. My podcast did a live show in Vermont ahead of the Women's Week for Vermont Green. And it was actually all about this journey that I've been on, where I retired from soccer about a year and a half ago. Of course, it was really devastating and really difficult for me to move on emotionally from the sport that I have played and loved my whole life. And I think that moving to Vermont was really a part of that healing process, and getting so welcomed by the soccer community here has been something unexpected, but also has really brought me back to the game, which towards the end of my career became kind of painful physically and emotionally. So Vermont heals all wounds. I love it so much. I think, thinking back to 18 months ago, entering in this new field, editor-in-chief of a platform, vertical, whatever we call it. It's been a wild ride, and I'm really proud of what we've made. And I'm also really ambitious about what we can make moving forward. And so I've learned a ton, and I know there's so much more to learn, but I'm really grateful for the whole thing.
Sam, it really does seem that you've channeled all of the intention, the hard work, the care, the joy that you brought to the pitch when you were playing into this next phase of your career. And I'm wondering if you could just give us a snapshot. I'm sure every week varies week to week in your life, but if you could give us a snapshot, sort of like general average summary of what a week in your life looks like, what does that picture look like?
Yeah, I would actually love to. It is crazy how different it is week to week. Sometimes it blows me away. We'll have an internal work meeting, and the director of TWG will go, well, we just have a pretty mellow week this week. And it's actually like the production calendar has all this crazy stuff in it. But typically we'll write and record Good Vibes on Mondays. And I get to do that show, which is kind of our weekly topical show with Becky Sauerbrunn, Orlin Biondolo. So that's my favorite thing to do ever, because I get to just hang out with one of my best friends for an hour and a half on Monday afternoons, record this whole podcast about everything that's going on in our lives, about soccer, about women's soccer. That comes out on Tuesdays. We'll do some quality control, listening back to the episodes, chatting about a few things, cutting some of those promos. The team that I have at the women's game is so talented, and I hardly ever have notes for anybody, so I just get to float along as editor-in-chief, but they're really doing all the work. And then throughout the week, we will probably do one or two other recordings with guests that come out on our interview podcast, which comes out on Thursdays. We'll have some meetings. You guys know how it is. There's more things to meet about than there are to actually do. So the meetings take up a good chunk of time, but the weekends are spent watching soccer, exploring Vermont. I have been training for a swim race that I'm doing in Lake Tahoe in July. I'm actually doing that with Kelly O'Hara. So weekday mornings look like going to the pool, now going to the lake because it's getting to be warm enough. Doing some other exercise, walking. My dogs are, scattered throughout the days every day, and enjoying some friends, enjoying having dinner with my husband, who is a great cook. Kind of a normal week, I'd say.
How idyllic. I love that.
You got to move to Vermont. We're all
selling
moving
it
here.
pretty hard.
We're all moving here.
We're just going to have a little women's soccer commune up here. It's going to be great. Let's actually talk about Vermont Green, because they've got 2 games already announced as sold out. You've got some returning players. You've got some new players. I know, Sam, early on, this team had been like, hey, what if you want to coach? And you were like, I don't know about this.
I don't know how to coach.
What is year 2 like? Obviously I've been at a couple of these training sessions so far heading into this week of games, but, what are the vibes like? What is this team, do you think, going to look like this week?
The team is so amazing. I think that, having been in these players' shoes, showing up to play for a team in a new area for a week, play in 2 games, it's a wild experience. Like, you show up, you're trying out, and then the next day you're already talking about how to set up for set pieces. It's such an accelerated timeline. And I think there was something that happened actually today at training where you could just tell some of the girls were like tense, nervous, we're trying out, we have a game tomorrow. And a few of us on the coaching staff were like, how can we get them to take a deep breath and relax? And that's where I feel so connected to the girls. Even, my gosh, this is crazy, but we had to pass out pennies, and I could see the girls in their heads. I'm trying to give context to this. As a player, pennies are getting passed out. You're going, which team is the starting team and which team is the subs team?
The politics of pennies.
And the politics of pennies. And you can see the girls looking around. Who's getting a penny? Who's not getting a penny? What team am I on? Am I starting this game? And I relate to them so much because that was me. Like, my gosh, I just remember being on the national team and just going, am I on Lindsay's team? Am I on Rose's team? Am I on Becky's team? What does that mean? Who's starting? What's the lineup? And so I really relate to them, and I really want to make this experience fun for them. Fortunately, the coaching staff around me has so much more experience coaching than me, and I have learned so much from them. So I just think that the combination of staff and players is going to achieve our ultimate goal, which is to put on a great game, great performances for the community and the crowd here that are fans of Vermont Green. And that's really all I can ask for.
That's amazing. It sounds very much like you're in a learning era of sorts between coaching, between stepping into this new media job 18 months in. But with coaching, given what you've experienced so far and given all that you've been learning, is there an interest to sort of take it to the next level when it comes to coaching, maybe scaling up beyond Vermont?
Honestly, I would tell you if I knew. I find it fascinating. There is a part of being on the field, an element of that I really miss. That being, around the locker room. I know technically maybe not in the locker room, maybe not really a part of the players group anymore, which is devastating. But just kind of having that connection to the team, the energy from the team. One of the assistant coaches had this idea to make a playlist where all the girls contributed one song. And I'm like, that's what I miss, is like this collaborative thing that becomes our own. And I do think I'm getting that this week, being a part of this Vermont Green women's team, being a part of the coaching staff is its own little team. And honestly, I do get it at the women's game. My gosh, my coworkers are also wonderful, but it's definitely different. I think I've become used to what I'm doing now. I've become used to podcasting from home. I love getting out of the house in the mornings, going out to the field, interacting with the girls. But, I hope the world is my oyster and maybe I can do both. Maybe I can keep trying a few things out. I honestly don't know, but I am kind of open to anything.
I mean, it's not that.
What a non-answer.
No, I think
it's
that's
honest.
fair. It's fair. I will say I want to vouch for Sam. I watched her be a team leader at the live show, giving all of her staff little local gift boxes from the Vermont Marshmallow Company for s'more making. And I was like,
oh my God,
what a Vermont gift. It's so good.
I feel like I went to the company and I was like, please let me do a live show here. Please send the staff. And then, of course, the staff is all like, okay, I guess we're going to Vermont because Sam wants us to. So I just really wanted, and all of them flew in and out really quick, and I just wanted to send a little piece of Vermont home with them because I so appreciate all the work they do, but especially for kind of humoring me and coming all the way here to help me put on this show.
It's not that bad a flight. All right, let's talk about media stuff, though, because I feel like this is something that, we talk about, too. I think about, what Tobin Heath is out here doing and in her space. We've seen this influx of players come into the media space and, let's maybe rewind a little bit because you started Snacks with then Lynn Williams over 4 years ago. I mean, first of all, like, when you think back to those first episodes of that show, do you think of them fondly? Do you think like, ooh, wow, I didn't really know anything? Like, what's the memory?
Both. Yeah, I mean, both. Fondly, yes. Snacks was such a joy to make. Lynn and I had no idea what we were doing. We had a few different producers like bopping in and out. I think that show itself evolved, and I do think we evolved, especially I think it's third season. I wasn't really playing, so I was putting some more time into it, and I hope we got better as time went on. I think, as the show got a little bit more established and we had some more people working with us closely, it was really sad for that to end. But I think sometimes I think of it like I had to get like a big girl job. Like my soccer career was ending and I had to kind of just do what was best for me. My life changed. And so my job kind of changed, obviously. And I think one thing I always say is, and I don't want this to come off as just like, I'm hyping my company up, but they invested in us and invested in me when I was like kind of an unproven person in this field. Like I made a fun podcast once a week with my friend and they were really like, no, we're going to really put money into this and try to make this its whole entire own thing. And so I'm so grateful that they gave me that opportunity because I do feel like I'm capable of growing into it and that I have grown a lot. And specifically, Raj Bennett, the founder of Men in Blazers, which is what the women's game is a part of, he gave me notes for the first 6 months on every single episode I did. And the kind of time commitment, the kind of like energy that he poured into me to help me grow into this, I will like never forget. I think that I have really evolved into it. I think I understand a lot better now, not to get too into the weeds about media stuff, but giving context to things so that the listener understands where you're at in the story and you're not just telling inside jokes with your friends. I bet if I listened to season 1 of Snacks, I'd be like, what are we even talking about? We gave no context. It was just me and Lynn giggling. So I've learned a ton, and I'm just super grateful because I do feel like the shows we're making have evolved and that I've evolved hopefully as a host.
Well, that's actually a great springboard into the next question, which is to sort of unpack that growth, transitioning from Snacks to the women's game. What were some of the bigger changes that you had to make, or what were some of the ways specifically that you had to grow when it came to hosting a podcast? One with your best friend, maybe, yes, giggling for some episodes, to what you're doing now.
Yeah, I think one thing that's been so interesting, which I wonder how you guys feel about, is before, when I was making Snacks, I was on the inside. I was on a team, and I knew what was going on with the players. I kind of knew more what was going on behind the scenes with the national team. And now I'm really, really on the outside. So when we're talking about things in the media, I have this little voice in my head sometimes that's like, I don't think this is what the players are talking about, because I remember as a player seeing things in the media and being like, what are they talking about? That's not it at all. And so I do kind of always have this am I getting this right? And I may or may not be. I still think that the audience for the shows that we're making is interested in so many of the conversations. My gosh, especially what you two are making and creating and talking about. There have been a lot of other changes. I just think logistically having this as a job, I'm on Slack now. I was never on Slack for Snacks. It's a whole other animal world, editing promos, thinking out about a production calendar with multiple shows a week over the course of an entire year. Where are the major events? What extra coverage are we doing for the Euros? Are we doing a live show for the NWSL Championship? Thinking through these things. And again, luckily I have a huge, very talented team around me, but it's just a lot more in depth, and I understand so much better now what media companies do.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is so interesting because as I've talked to you, to Tobin, to all, there's so many players now kind of coming over to this side and either straddling that line of playing and having a show or doing content or, being on broadcasts and then shifting into retirement and then kind of feeling that full transition. But I mean, how do you navigate maybe some of those spaces where you're friends with these players, but you're also trying to cover them?
Yeah.
But you're there is, I think, some really interesting tension where Tamerra and I are kind of over here just being like, okay, well, this is what we think is happening, right? To your point of being on the outside and having that outside viewpoint, which maybe the players aren't talking about it, but fans are.
Totally.
Yeah.
I totally get that. I think one thing I'll point to is the 2023 World Cup. I was technically still on Kansas City. My sister was on the roster. The team didn't do great. It's all my best friends. A lot of people in the media were like, this team sucks. And I had this oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to do this. I'm not gonna be able to cover this. How could I don't want to even think about criticizing some of my best friends, this roster, this team that my sister is on. So there has been a really at times difficult personal crossover where I want to cover honestly and, do my duty to the listener and to the fans. But I do have these personal ties and relationships. And I think what I'll kind of say humorously, but not really, is that luckily all my friends are really good. And so I don't have to criticize them that much. But it certainly has presented challenges for me. I think, even the similar things as when you're a player, when you have to criticize your own club for something happening, when you have to criticize your own league for something happening. I think there's a certain element of you have to be able to look in the mirror and say, am I being authentic and working in an ethical way and in an honest way? And those have been, definitely some conversations that I've had as this year and a half has gone by.
Oh, this is so fascinating. And just to sit with the sort of tension that we're discussing a little bit more, have you, since entering this space, thought about that ecosystem a little bit differently in terms of how each of these parts, while distinct, are all sort of working together to form this, whether it's a narrative, whether it's a picture of what's happening in women's soccer right now?
Totally. I think that, and this is something that I really lean heavily on these other outlets, especially you guys, to do, is when news comes out about the league, or Meg, I've texted you and just said, is this a good thing? The narrative, the response from trusted sources is so important because it shapes what everybody thinks. And it's been to me, I think, I was an English major in college, but I was naive in understanding really what is the responsibility of the news? What is the responsibility of journalism? But what it really is to like inform and shape the opinions of the people who are absorbing it. I have a responsibility to have responsible conversations and not just respond emotionally, not just respond with a gut reaction. Whereas I think as a player, it is a little bit different to just be like, well, how does this affect me as a player? And I either am or am not going to respond. It's a way bigger responsibility than I've ever thought about. And that is where I'm so grateful that there are other people doing this and exploring these things, because you kind of get to check in on where they're at with certain things. We're all really fortunate to have each other and to kind of, to use a phrase we use at our podcast a lot, gut check each other.
All right, when you're thinking about the future, right, obviously we've got NWSL Championship, Euros immediately, AFCON, like all these tournaments, a little summer break for the NWSL. What's next for the women's game? What do you want to accomplish?
Oh my gosh, I love this question, but I do have to think about it, because I think a lot of times you're just so in the day-to-day. Like right now I'm coaching Vermont Green women, and then I'm thinking about the FIFA window coming up, and then I'm thinking about the Euros. And so I do think if I'm trying really hard to zoom out, I really want to have a presence at the major moments. And I think what's tough about that sometimes is you want to be there for the NWSL Championship and you want to be there at the World Cup final, but I also want to be there for the listeners who are at home. I want to watch the World Cup final with them and talk to them and then react to it with them. And so it's kind of this constant battle of like, do you want to have a presence at games, or do you want to be there for all the thousands of people who are watching from home, and do you want to watch with them? Something I will say in that vein is that I love being home. And so part of me is like, I want to be at home with the fans. But big picture for the women's game, I hope we can keep growing. I think expanding our talent roster would be such a dream. Obviously, our model is to kind of be there, is to be there more often, is to be there after games, is to be there when there are big events happening. And we adjust our schedule in order to do that. And so getting more talent to come on board and having more shows is definitely a goal of ours, and something that I'm really excited we're kind of starting to dip our toes into. I think even expanding our reach on social, on YouTube, like there are all these metrics that working at a company like Men in Blazers that is growing and is so big, we have so many resources to put on live shows, to talk to the YouTube guy, talk to the social media experts. Like, I'm just finding that my opportunities to grow and learn and to help the women's game grow and expand are, kind of ever evolving, and there's always somebody that I could reach out to figure out what's next.
Sam, you mentioned one of the goals within that picture is to bring more talent on board, and it made me think about one of the, at times, challenges, I think, of producing a show, and especially even as a writer, which is to actually schedule the interview with the talent. I'm wondering what your experience as a former player who maybe has some personal connections to maybe a player that you want to bring onto the show, but now also as a media practitioner who has to go through maybe sometimes the more official channels, dealing with these tight, busy schedules, maybe someone who sets something up and then needs to cancel last minute, not knowing how that's going to affect you. What's your experience been like with that?
It sounds like we've all had the same experience, and that it can be so difficult. I have offered 5 a.m. to players in Europe. I have done U.S. Women's National Team Game live reaction shows starting at 12:30 a.m., going till 1:30 a.m. Booking talent is hard. Sometimes I go through personal channels. Sometimes I say, if you're more comfortable setting me up with your media person, let me know. Sometimes we go straight through the team. It kind of depends on how close I am with them, but it's been super interesting. Like, I think one thing I have working for me is that I'm so type A that we're booked out. Like, we have a few weeks lined up. We have a few episodes banked usually. Sometimes recording with active players, like we have to record Good Vibes every Monday with Lynn and Becky. And I think when Becky was playing last year, and then even in our history doing snacks when Lynn and I were both playing, sometimes you're not available on a Monday. And so working around, sometimes you do it on Sunday, sometimes you do it Tuesday morning, sometimes there's a quick turnaround time. And then you have to think about, okay, is the staff having to now work on 4th of July weekend if I have to schedule a podcast on? So there's a lot to consider. Booking is hard.
I feel like we're peeling back the curtain right now. Just everybody.
The people need to know what we go through sometimes.
All right, Sam, before we let you out of here, we do have hopefully some fun closing questions for you that are a little more general, not necessarily about the media game. But let's start off with hopefully an easy one. Who is your favorite player in the NWSL at this moment? And I do want to disqualify Lynn immediately because I know that's an obvious answer.
Yes, I was actually also going to disqualify some of my other best friends.
Okay.
Non-best friend. Favorite player in the NWSL right now? I'm going Riley Tiernan.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Angel City has been fun to watch. I know they've been up and down all over the place, but that's kind of what makes them fun to watch.
I agree.
Riley Tiernan as a rookie, I just love watching her. I think she has a bright future. I'm excited for her. And again, like there's just something about Angel City that's like, I want to watch it. Whatever is going to happen in this game, I'm here for it.
And now they got a new coach, which adds a whole new layer of intrigue.
Totally.
Yeah, I'm with you. And not just because I'm a California native. A little bit of bias, but not too much. Okay, next question. U.S. Women's National Team head coach Emma Hayes has set a record for the number of fresh faces that she's invited to national team camp. Right now, we are at 19 new players, uncapped. Who do you think should be the 20th fresh face to be invited to national team camp?
Dang, I think I was gonna say Riley Tiernan for this one, but I can adjust. Maybe Lily Reel. I
She's
think
my
maybe
other favorite
Lily
rookie
Reel.
right now.
And you know what? I think that we're seeing Emma is looking for depth at outside back. We've seen that, of course. Avery Patterson has been coming in and doing well. Carrie Abello came in; she played in the game. And so I think maybe as Emma is looking for depth at outside back, Lily Reel could get a nod.
Yeah.
She's been
Lily
great so
Reel
far.
is from Hingham, Massachusetts, which is very close to my hometown, by the way.
It's very
Love
true.
it.
And small world, her sister Sophie is playing on Vermont Green for me this week.
The degrees of separation.
Yep.
There are none.
All right, Sam, a you question real quick. What is your favorite goal that you ever scored in your career and why? Because like my immediate thought, and we've, I think, talked about this, is the 2017 semifinal where North Carolina had to play in Portland. You scored an absolute banger in that semifinal, and that was when I was working at the NWSL, and like right behind the goal, taking a video, and you can hear the ball against the net, and it was just like a rocket.
Yeah, I remember that one. I really remember that one fondly. And I think the only reason I think it was 2018, and I still could be wrong, is because I had got my knee injury at the end of 2017, and 2018 I was struggling to come back. And then I scored that goal, and I was like, am I back? So it was like kind of a big moment for me because, you know, the knee injury.
I think it was 2018. Because, Yep.
Because we also won in whatever, whole story. Of course, it's my career, so I do remember the day. But
fair.
it is probably that goal. I thought about, you know, my first World Cup goal, which was against Thailand, which I have never really felt joy like that in my whole life from that World Cup goal. I was just so happy and proud of myself. But that 2018 goal that you're talking about, Meg, obviously that knee injury is eventually what ended my career. And so coming back from that initial contact and, you know, crutches, brace, you know, this is really serious, Sam, your career might never be the same. And then I scored this goal. That meant a lot to me too. And it was kind of a banger. So it was a solid one.
All right, Sam, just to up the ante, up the tension a bit with this last question, let's imagine we're at the 2025 NWSL Championship.
Okay.
We've gone through extra time. We're now at penalties. There is one last kick to decide the game. We don't have to go into which teams. It will be implied.
It's Lola Bonta. Are you kidding me?
Ooh.
It's Lola Bonta.
Ooh.
I have to. I didn't even need you to finish the question.
You knew where I was
just
going
like,
with it.
Who's going to handle this pressure and probably nail it upper 90 and just like not even sweat?
And it would be probably her most epic celebration yet.
Totally.
Yeah.
Which is part of, like, that's 50% of the reason, I think, for me right there.
Yeah.
No,
I
all
love
right.
that. And realistically, Kansas City doing pretty good. Probably is going to be there.
It's looking good for them, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty solid. All right, Sam. Well, we appreciate the time. As a Vermonter, I cannot wait for these Vermont Green FC games. Sold out crowd. I think the atmosphere. I mean, it was so wild last year because that was also penalty kicks. As if
Don't
you
remind me.
I remember that. I remember seeing it on Instagram.
If you
Oh
were
my
not
gosh.
at the live show at Higher Ground here in Burlington, you have to listen or watch the live show back because the player that took the decisive winning penalty kick has a really great story about it. One of my favorite moments of the show. I don't want to spoil it because it's such a good twist. But yeah, I think it's going to be a fun time.
Meg, I feel like this is almost a cliche, especially in the women's soccer world, to call someone a lovely human, but truly, Sam Mewis. Spectacular human being.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. It is
Sometimes
really...
you just got to give the flowers, you know?
It was really, like, it's also really funny because I feel like Sam is someone that I've covered for a really long time. And I covered Christy Mewis when she was still at Boston College, right? Like, I'm showing my age, but it is really fun, I think, for a lot of these players to, like, watch them move into this space and suddenly have almost a reversal of, like, sometimes they'll come to me and be like, what do I do here? Or how do I get myself onto this mailing list, right? And so it has been kind of deeply entertaining, but also very sweet to watch these transitions. But Sam, obviously, I overuse good egg a lot, but like Sam is a true good egg.
Truly. And it was so refreshing, especially as professional journalists who've been doing this for a long time, to hear the perspective of, it's always interesting to hear the perspective of anyone who enters the media space and the transitions that they have to make, the things that they learn about the media industry once they're inside and not just consuming it. But anytime you hear it from a former player who is literally kind of crossing from one line to the other, having a totally different shift in mindset about what it is that we do, how it gets done. There was a part of me, like my journalism heart, felt so validated. Like someone else sees this struggle who didn't, go to journalism school and follow the traditional path the way we did. So shout out to Sam for illuminating that, because it's not an easy job. It's really not.
No, it's also, I think it is such an interesting thing too of, when you think about coverage of women's sports and coverage of women's soccer in particular, obviously there are so many different avenues, and podcasts do fill a very specific part of this niche, right? And like, I know we're getting into inside baseball, as we like to say, but there is this sense of, podcasts can be looser, right? And like, it's a space for us to maybe talk through some of the things that we are thinking about or have these longer form conversations. And so they maybe fill a different space than like straight up reporting or straight up analysis that lives on the website or that you're writing, or even if you're, tweeting through something. And so I think even talking about how these formats maybe favor different things or allow us to be a little bit looser with our thoughts while still giving a full context. And that, like, I think, when she was talking about you've got to make sure that people are coming into the right part of the story, I felt that because I constantly get that note of like, dial it back a little bit. We got to explain where we are.
Yeah, because when you're so deep in the weeds, it's hard to know, one, how deep you are, and two, where you are relative to the people around you who are listening to or reading your work. So many things that we have to think about. I am curious though, Meg, I know we talked to Sam about her coaching journey, but as someone who has witnessed her coaching, what kind of coach is she? Like, what's her vibe? Is she a yeller? Is she like, paint the picture for us, as for those of us who have not had the pleasure of visiting Burlington, let alone when Sam is coaching a game.
Yeah, not a yeller, not by any stretch. I do think it is, I don't think I went to any trainings last year. I think me going to Vermont Green trainings, both the men's and women's this year, is a new thing, which is really fun. Like, I appreciate folks like Pat and Sam, some of the owners of Vermont Green, who allow me to hang out on mornings with the squad. But I think there is a real sense of, she's right, there's an accelerated timeline here. They're playing 2 friendlies. These players, even on day 1, which was on Sunday of this week, I was hearing players go, wait, what's your name again? Right? Like, there are some who were here last year. Some have played together. There's a couple of girls from the University of Vermont. There's a couple of girls from Penn State, actually. Someone, I think, just transferred to FSU. So, like, they've assembled some really good talent, but they don't necessarily all know each other. So, day 1 was kind of small-sided games, trying to get a feel for what players can do offensively and defensively. And then day 2 really shifts into, okay, we are now a team and we need to figure out, here's how we're going to play. Yeah, exactly. And so I think day 1, Sam was a little more able to sit back and observe. And then day 2, she really stepped into that coaching role. And it honestly, like, again, it is fun for me to watch and see that side of, a player that I always think back to, I'm almost positive it was Sam, but US Soccer at one point did kind of a soccer IQ test. That was this external thing, and Sam Mewis reportedly got one of the highest scores out of any player.
Surprised?
And so trying to see her take that knowledge and her own experience and transform that into coaching in this very short time frame is really interesting for me to watch, just even on like a human level of how do you do that and how do you take all this knowledge that's in your head and get it into a group of women in a very short period of time. So it's definitely been really fun.
Especially because, they say not all who can do can teach. Or I guess I'm flipping on what is typically said about that. But the multifaceted Sam Mewis never ceases to impress. And I'm really excited to see where she takes her career. I mean, I really admire how it's almost like she was aware of all of the different paths that she could pursue after she retired, but wasn't limited to how that needed to look. I will not hold it against anyone for wanting to be in cities like LA or New York after they retire for the marketing opportunities, the business opportunities, but she's really following her own path. And I do think there's something to be said about the reward that you get for staying true to yourself. I feel like she is sort of living in that right now. And it's just so cool to see. So yeah. Great conversation. Hopefully she can come back again sometime. And maybe I'll be the one visiting Vermont, because
I know,
at
we
this
gotta
point,
get you out here.
It needs to happen. I want to try those marshmallows.
Totally.
Still thinking about that gift. So
I
sweet.
mean, like,
no pun
we're,
intended.
there's just, I feel like everybody has very firm opinions on local things. We have Creamies, our form of soft serve ice cream that is like a specialty. There's all these coffee places.
Those maple candies you brought when you met in New York.
Everything maple. Like, if you like maple syrup, this is the place to be, clearly. So, good time.
TBD for me at least. All right. Well, in addition to everything that we've discussed, there is always more women's sports to talk about, to consume, to follow. And if you didn't know, The Athletic has partnered with Yahoo Sports to provide free best-in-class coverage of women's sports, which you can check out at the Women's Sports Hub, sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. As always, the link to that is in the show notes. And that's our show. Sam Mewis, what a joy, truly. Last time I'm saying it, but I can't say it enough. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode as much as we did recording it. This has been Full Time. My name is Tamerra Griffin, and I am probably going to be thinking about marshmallows for a minute on Blue Sky and Instagram.
I am Meg. I'm also on Instagram and Blue Sky. I will probably be posting my way through those 2 women's friendlies out of Vermont Green. So if you're not up here, if you're not one of the 2,500 that got a ticket, I will try to bring you some sort of content. It's honestly probably going to be my usual photo of my zero gravity beer with my free Ben & Jerry's ice cream in front of the field.
I can picture the Instagram post of that right now.
But that's the vibe. That's the Vermont vibe. So also don't forget, you can follow the show. Send us mailbag questions at TA Fulltime, YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok.
We can't wait to answer those questions. Full Time is not possible without our podcast producer, Theo Lloyd-Hughes, our video producer, Leah Griffin, and our executive producer, Emily Olson. Thank you so much, as always, for listening, and we will see you guys soon.